Welcome to Beyond the Desk Admin Advocates, where we explore what it truly means to be an administrative professional in today's world. I'm Melissa Mahoney, CEO of the International Association of Administrative Professionals.
And I'm Rachel Suman, CXO of IAAP.
This podcast isn't your typical industry talk. We're here to bring you real conversations, real stories, and real solutions.
From AI to self-awareness journeys, we're here to discuss the deep issues that admins face every day. This is Beyond the Desk Admin Advocates.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are super excited to talk about one of our favorite topics, and that is networking, but with a little bit of a spin on it. We're actually going to talk about networking in connection with relationship building and why we think that those two are critically important to have together. And it also, we're going to highlight a little bit around why the IAAP community can really help you in your network building and growing and relationship building. So that's kind of the topic we're going to talk through today. And as you know, if you've been listening, we sort of kind of weave and flow through these topics. We don't really have an agenda per se, just some things that we definitely want to chat through. So we hope you'll sit back, relax, and if you're watching us, enjoy the video. And if you're listening, enjoy the episode.
Yes. You know, you said that, and I was just thinking the term networking, I think, has such an interesting connotation these days for us, right? Like it just carries a level of discomfort, ick for some people.
Anxiety. I think it can be anxiety.
Yeah, very like people in a room with a drink in their hand, like going up and trying to sell each other whatever they're selling, and
hi, my name is stickers come to mind.
Oh, hi, my name is whoever invented that. Thank you.
Right.
But I think it's really important. Like, I think we should deconstruct the networking a little bit as we're talking through kind of the relational piece of it, because it is a really important distinction that we are not talking like networking doesn't mean that to us. And, nobody's surprised by that. But you hear that word, and I think it's a visceral reaction for some people, especially who have survived those types of events.
Yes. And if you're introverted like me, networking is a bad word. It already has a negative connotation because it's difficult. It's much more difficult for some folks to walk into a room and think about networking. And I think we've made it worse. I think, in the last 10 or 15 years, networking has become such a buzzword, and has added some anxiety to the mix. So that's really why we want to talk about why we think relationship building goes hand in hand with networking. I don't think you can have one without the other and successfully build a true professional network. And your professional network, as we talk about with the IAAP community, it actually intersects with your personal network.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to, but it definitely can. And I think in the IAAP community, for sure, most of our folks would say, they have this intersection of personal and professional network when it comes to relationship building inside of our community specifically. So really, really excited to your point, deconstruct maybe the connotation around networking, and talk about relationship building in a way that might make it more accessible to you. So let's start with, we have an analogy that we want to share with you, and we're probably going to weave this analogy throughout the entire episode. So let's introduce it to you first. And I actually have to give a nod to Veronica Cochran, who I think is the person who really gave us this analogy first, and it just fits so beautifully. And that's if you think of relationship building sort of as currency, and maybe as your network as a bank, and not in an icky way, but it can really help you start to understand that currency exchange actually does occur. And while it's not money, relational currency is tangible. It's a real thing that happens inside of relationship building. And when you're building your network, you can get a collection mentality, and you start collecting all of these people in your network. And if you think of that as a bank, you might have all of these accounts. You might have the biggest bank of, folks in your network. But if you don't have any currency in those accounts, it's not a very rich bank. And so you're probably not going to be able to use that network to your best advantage, and advantage in a good way, not in a, again, not in a negative sort of way. I mean, I think there is a currency exchange that happens. So if you can think of the bank and then each individual account or person as a currency exchange, we can talk about depositing in and out. And that analogy really gives us a lot of tools to talk through what we mean when we say relationship building. So that's kind of the setup of how we want to have you picture relationship building.
Yeah. I love that analogy too, when Veronica first introduced it to us, because that's part of the ick of networking, right? Is it's very transactional. You cease to become a human, you cease to become a person. You are an opportunity. You are a sale. You are a whatever the thing is. And so the analogy can feel a little bit like that, but it actually is the complete opposite. So stick with us as we kind of work through this, but it really is important, because relationship building can feel a little ethereal too, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm building relationships. Well, what does that mean? What does that even look like? So the currency piece gives you a little something tangible to wrap your mind around. And I think the first thing that we will say about it, and you said it already, and I'm going to reiterate it because it is so important. This is human first. This is people first. So this is not, I'm going to go and take out all this money at the bank and leave something and go to the next person and take all of this money out. Like, it really is an exchange between two human people. So keep that in mind. Like, filter, lens, whatever you want. It is a human first experience when we're talking about connecting and relationship building and networking.
Right. And, if you leave all of these accounts in the negative, you have nothing to show for, the work and time that it takes to build those relationships. So you really do need to be mindful of that currency exchange. And in the transaction concept, there is a give and take in that. So I think, yes, we want you to focus on that human experience. And part of that is the exchange.
Yeah.
There is a transaction that takes place that is part of what I'm giving to you and what you're giving to me in return. And that doesn't have to be a literal transaction.
Mm-hmm.
That can be value, that can be empathy, that can be curiosity, that can be, the shoulder that someone needs to cry on. There's an exchange that happens in that's what we're talking about when we say transaction. We're not talking about you gave me a resume review and I gave you a job.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those can be benefits of relational currency exchanges, but those are that's the after impact. What we're talking about in transaction and exchanges today are the very value-based, human-specific things that occur in a relationship. And I think when you start to look at it in a maybe one-dimensional or transactional viewpoint, that's when the connotation around networking comes into play. So we are not only deconstructing that, but we're asking you to sort of put that aside, because that's not what we're talking about. We really are talking about those exchanges where you're showing up as your full human self. And that's where the currency exchange starts to take place. And you can feel it happening in those moments. You can touch it, you can feel it, like, okay, I have just made a deposit in this account. And now if I ever need something, I know who I can go to. And when I say need, I don't mean like I need an actual tangible thing from you. Maybe like I need someone to listen. I need someone who has been through this before. And that person I know is going to pick up the phone when I call because I've made some deposits into that account. That's really what we're talking about when we say even transaction in this moment is a transaction of human experience, not a transaction of benefits.
Yeah. And I think it can be both and, right? Like if you've established an account at a bank, you have the funds in there that you need. Sometimes you do just need a transaction. Maybe you do need a job reference. You need someone to share a role that's open within your network. You need, like, maybe you do need some of those. And the chances of having that go well and positively for you are much more likely to occur in the accounts that you have the currency available to be able to withdraw on that and say, hey, I really need this favor. I lost my job and I'm looking for something else. Does anybody know of anything? That is at its essence, I think, a transactional one, but you're drawing on currency that you have already built with people.
Right. Yeah. And if you, to your point, you're going to get a different response and reaction from an account that's negative or that doesn't have a lot of currency in it. And if you're already asking for those transactional benefits from that relationship, the outcome is going to be very different. You may still get the benefit, but that might also come at a pretty significant cost to you.
Yeah.
That might look like a true, well, I gave you this, and so I'm going to call you in 2 weeks, and you're going to feel
what do I get back?
What it feels like when someone's asking you for a benefit and they have no currency in the account. And so that is where the currency that you've built up really supports a greater outcome when you do ask for those benefits. It's a different ask. It's a different ask. It's a different outcome. It's a different response generally.
Yes. So we've talked about that. How do we build currency with people?
Great question. So I sort of gave you a peek behind the curtain a little bit earlier when I was talking about some of the human experiences. But it really boils down to, I think if I were to put it into one word, presence. I really do think that being present with someone, no matter what the situation is, that you can access something there that we're pointing to when we say the human experience, when you're truly present in a space, in a conversation, in a room, a networking room, just being present and open to really listen, to be curious, to do all of those things we've been talking about that are leadership competencies we keep telling you to grow and develop over and over and over again. But the reason we keep focusing on those things is because this is how they show up in real life. They show up in, I'm going to a networking event. How am I going to make the most of this event? And I would say be present. We get in our heads, we get in our own way more often than not. A lot of times we will approach a networking event pre-prepared to either already know what we're going to experience there or prepare ourselves for all of the many different experiences we might have. And that often blocks the ability to actually truly experience what happens in that room. And that also prevents you from having those human currency exchanges with folks in the room where you're really truly invested in learning more about who they are and what they want and need, what they want out of the networking event. You get to those real opportunities to build currency by being present.
I love that. So true. And you were talking about that, and I was thinking about the many conferences and experiences that I've done throughout my role. And I think back to the people that I've met, and sometimes you see those folks again, sometimes you may not, but really going in, I think, from a state of curiosity. Your presence is such a great word, because it really is curious. Like, I like to ask more questions than I answer in those spaces, and you get to know people on a human level. So everybody feels a different comfort level about talking about home or personal or whatever, but I think a universal truth, and this is said completely without judgment, but a universal truth is people tend to like talking about themselves, right? Whether it's their work, their families, their volunteer, whatever it is. And so really going in saying, I am curious about who this person is at their core, however deep that goes. You might have 5 minutes, 10 minutes with somebody, so you can't, assess their entire life situation, but you can learn a little bit about them and maybe find something in common with them. And that's a connection. That is a moment, and you've made a deposit, and they've made a deposit with you, and it goes both ways.
Very, very true. And I do think that curiosity is is sort of its presence is one, and 1A, and curiosity is probably 1B, because I think they do go hand in hand, and really being curious and truly wanting to get to know someone, or wanting to build that currency. To your point, I think it's important we talk through the professional versus personal um, sort of issue that we have here, because IWP is a professional community, and we're focused on your professional, administrative professional career, and that boundary looks different for everyone. So there are some folks who don't have a boundary, that they're pretty much an open book, and those people when you meet them. And I love that for them. It is like,
So
it's
great.
part of, yeah, it's great. And there are other folks who are like, in order for me to do this well, I know myself, and I know I need boundaries. And so this is my professional world. And that doesn't mean that they necessarily have to mask, but it does mean that they've set some boundaries around what they will and won't talk about in a professional environment versus a personal environment, or a family member, or a best friend that they have. They may have boundaries around what topics or how much of themselves they reveal to you, and that's okay too. I love that for them as well. So I think if we can be more curious about how other people prefer to interact and engage, then you will be able to make much quicker deposits, much quicker exchanges of currency, if we don't assign our preferences to everyone else's preference. And that's where curiosity can really support you in that. It is completely human nature for us to just assume that everyone experiences the world the way we do. That's purely a human response. It's hard for us to tap into that curiosity. Our brains want to go on autopilot. They're designed to go on autopilot as often as it can. And so I do think that you have to work at the presence and the curiosity, and you also have to work at respecting other people's experiences and sort of tapping into the appreciation that someone else is going to experience an event, someone else is going to experience the world, the career, all of those things differently than you do. And you can learn a lot from them if you can tap into that currency.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I will add on to that too, to say, anytime you have an account with someone, the bank is open, whatever, analogy you want to throw in there, like, there are no neutral exchanges, right? Like, there are neutral exchanges when we pass people on the street, when there's no account there. But once you have an account open, it is either a deposit or a withdrawal. So going into each interaction with someone that you have an account with very intentionally in that way, I think is really essential, because to your point about autopilot, it's very easy to slip into those moments, and you may be unintentionally making withdrawals on the regular, thinking that it's a neutral exchange, and there is no such thing. So this is a very intentional practice to curate and care for your network of accounts, banks, however. I hope that somebody draws this all out, just kind of draft it and send it to us if you do, because it really, it takes some intentional thought, especially if you're not someone who this kind of comes very naturally to, or if it is and you've got way too many accounts, keeping track of everybody and staying connected and ensuring that you're just doing check-ins. You need a system. You need something to ensure that they are at the level that you want them to be. That some of them are deeper than others, but if they're all surface level, you're missing some really cool opportunities.
Yeah, if you're a Pokemon Go player, the point of this is not to collect them all. You really do have to spend the time to really get to know, if we're sticking with Pokemon analogy, get to know every character and, all of the intricacies of that character. But instead of having the mentality of just collect, when you don't stop to actually build the currency in the accounts, there's nothing to draw from. So, and I do just want to reiterate what you were saying about having intention. There is no neutral exchange. There's no neutral exchange ever. And I know even, in those relationships that have depth, Rachel and I will use our relationship as an example. We often find ourselves like calling a timeout to check in because we know each other so well. We work together so closely. We can move in autopilot fairly quickly and easily, and we will have to stop ourselves to say, like, we need to do. Let's just do a check-in on, like, are we
Are you
good?
good? Is everything good?
Okay, so in a first for us, we had a major disruption. There was a fire alarm in the building. So if you see like a weird edit on this episode, that is why. I think
It would have only been better if this had been a adaptability topic podcast.
how to adapt to any situation. We were literally, while we were out standing outside from the fire alarm, talking about how we could use this and wrap it into the relational currency. And we're like, well, sometimes there are fire alarms in relationships, and that requires immediate attention.
Drop everything.
Yeah, you might have to take every single penny out of that account at that moment. And that's the best we could come up with to connect it to the alarm. But I know what we were trying to say when we were so rudely distracted by danger. Is Rachel and I, even in our relationship, often will do a check-in with one another because of that autopilot issue that our brains like to give us, like to challenge us with. It does require you to really approach every relationship with intention. And we were talking about that concept of neutrality, and that there is no neutral exchange. But we often assign or assume, especially when we have a lot of currency with folks or we know someone really well, that there is a neutral exchange, or it's the same exchange. It feels the same to us, so it must be the same. And oftentimes that takes us out of the curious space and out of our ability to be really present and see when it isn't. When there might be something on the other side of that requires a little bit more time, energy, investment. So I think approaching networking and relationship building from a place of true intention, where you're being really thoughtful about why you want to build currency with folks, like what is truly your end game. Get to the heart of, why you want a community to support you, and to why you want to build your network. Having the why will really help you be more intentional when you approach, and hopefully the analogy helps you approach relationship building with an understanding of what's actually happening, maybe behind the scenes, and the things that you can't see underneath the surface that are happening when you're actually building a relationship with folks.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you all may be thinking, what is the good of this? What's the benefit? Like, I know lots of people. Why do I need to kind of look at it differently? Or I don't know lots of people and my life's going just fine. Like, why are we talking about this? And before we dive into that, I just have to say, we did this episode very intentionally at this time for those of you who are coming to Summit in Chicago next month, or even virtually. This is really essential because that is such a perfect place to kind of really start to build out your banks and your accounts in that way. And, we hear stories all the time from people who know people from a summit that they met, 10 years ago, and they're still connected and they're still doing things. So you have an opportunity to put this into practice pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Yes. And you were talking about the benefits and the why, the what's in it for me. And I think what we'd like to wrap with is maybe an example of a currency exchange that could be really rich and valuable, or could be very surface level and maybe not have as much benefit. And that really comes into a great way to illustrate that is when we talk about a job search. That happens in our community all the time. I just saw someone on LinkedIn this morning who has been on a job search for several months and has really been working that currency and that community exchange with her community. And it's a very common professional benefit that we try to seek out from our network or from our community. And the example that Rachel and I really, really liked was, when you don't have a lot of currency with someone and you ask for support in a job search, you might get a job link. You might get a share on social media. They might boost your post to say, hey, I know this person who's looking for a job. Does anybody have any support? Or they might just blindly share it. That's great. There's a benefit there. But if you have a lot of currency with someone and you really want to cash it in, that might look like someone who champions you from the inside of an organization, who sends you a job and then goes to the hiring manager and says, hey, I know Rachel, and I think she would be a fabulous fit in our culture, in our community. I think she would add value. I really, really would highly recommend her. That is what a true cashing in on that currency might look like in a job search versus, just sending a link or sharing something on social media. There's a richness to that currency exchange when you really build the currency there. And you might find 2 or 3 of those accounts sort of cash in for you in that job search because you've built the currency with them in order to get that greater benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you are a connector, maybe, I think we have a lot of you in our community. I like to think of myself as one too. Like, you may not have a job in that situation, but you're like, oh, I know so-and-so, and you can be the connector between. So I think that's another really great benefit that we don't often think of in the relational currency, is maybe you're the bridge between 2 other accounts, and that actually is currency for yourself and the 2. Like, it expounds. So
yes,
so much opportunity in just knowing people. And that's really where that deepness comes. If you know enough about someone, then you can truly make connections with people who have similar interest, are looking for the same situation, whatever that is. So if you are the person or you are the connector of the people, it's all positive.
Yes, very much so. And I would say if you take away one thing from this episode, I hope it is that you really become more intentional about your approach to relationship building and networking. And if you're a part of the IWP community right now, think about which of those connections and which of those relationships could use some more currency and more intention in your approach, and start really building and be really present and curious while you're building those relationships.
Yes, absolutely. And come to summits.
Yes.
You can practice.
Absolutely. Hopefully we see you there.
It's so great to see you. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yes. Thank you. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Beyond the Desk Admin Advocates. We hope you enjoyed diving deep into the world of admins with us.
Remember, this podcast isn't just about listening. It's about taking action. Whether it's advocating for yourself in the workplace or supporting your fellow admins, let's continue to elevate this profession together. If you have any thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes, don't hesitate to reach out to us on social media or through our website.
Until next time, keep pushing beyond the desk. And remember, change begins with you. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.